All right. Welcome, welcome. Hello. I'm starting a little bit early, but here we are. I'll wait a few minutes while people roll in. Hello. Let me know where everybody's from. I love seeing people watching from basically the entire world. It's quite awesome. So we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about OpenAI versus Anthropic, specifically their revenue growth, specifically their penetration into enterprise. And we have a very special guest joining us, and I'll introduce him in a second. All right, Denmark. Let's see. What's up, Denmark? Steve from Scotland. Eric Cora from Oslo. Mesa, Arizona, Los Angeles. What's up, Los Angeles? Netherlands. I'll put some of these on the stream. Joining from the beach. Good place to be on a Friday. Czech Republic. What's up, Patrick? Switzerland. Hello. Hey, Meta. What's up, Meta from Switzerland? We got Jonathan from Jacksonville. Welcome. Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, buddy. What's up, Andrew? Iceland, Reykjavik. Isn't that where PCP games or CPC? What is it? CCP games. Excuse me. With Eve Online. Isn't that where they're from? Palestine, Cyprus, Portugal, Israel, New York. What's up, India? Germany, all over. Awesome. Welcome to the stream. Okay. Very cool. Welcome, welcome. We're going to have a nice casual stream today, but we have something important to talk about. And I want to bring on our guest. What's up, Cambodia? Nigeria? Amazing. Look at that. All over the world. All right. So we have a very special guest, Ara Karazian from Ramp, Economist from Ramp, basically putting out incredible reports. We've had him on the live show for Future Live, and he put out really an incredible report about Anthropic and OpenAI revenue and their penetration into enterprise. And so I pinged him, asked him to come on the show, and he was awesome to say yes. So Ara, I'm gonna bring you on. Give me one sec. Hold on. Give me a sec. I'm going to try to add you in here. You would think I'm better at this by now, but you would be wrong. There we go. Hey, Ara.
Am I on now? Cool.
Yes, you are.
I consider myself, thank you for the introduction. I consider myself a friend of the show since I've been
Absolutely.
on now two
Yeah, you're
times.
a two-timer now. That's right. That is official friend of the show territory. Welcome back. Welcome
Thank
back.
you.
Um, it's not normal for the guest to have a better looking setup than me, but you got it, and you got the chair, you got the tea, you got the background. The
The
mic
job of
sounds
an
great.
economist nowadays is to be more of a content creator, so it's rooted in my own desire to be forward looking and thinking about how to beat the competition. So
Yeah. Well, I really like the look you got going there. I'm actually building a second set right now, and I'm gonna take a more kind of let's see, like zoomed out look like you are right now. This is very much behind the scenes, by the way. But yeah, like very like much more zoomed out, not just me talking into the camera where you can only see the top quarter of my body, but that's in the works.
sweet. No, we should totally talk
Marmar
about
Labs,
AV
what's up?
in the next one.
Say it one more time. Sorry.
We should talk about AV setups in the next one.
Yeah. Well, we could spend the entire time today just talking about AV setups. Who cares about OpenAI and Anthropic now? Yeah, Marmar Labs. Hey, welcome back. Luigi Clemente, welcome back.
I'm loving these comments. Someone just wrote, "Is he AI?" JK. No,
Um,
I'm not.
who? Both of us? I don't. Yeah. Let's see. Where is that?
No,
Yeah. There it is. Yeah. Um, all right. By the way, Ara, have you seen that guy where he films those shorts where he's talking to OpenAI's voice mode?
Yeah.
I'm forgetting
He's
his name,
so
of course, and he gets him to say just
good.
wild things.
Yeah, I love him. I mean, I
Um,
can imagine. I think he did a video too, because some interview with Sam Altman showed Sam Altman one of this guy's
reacting.
videos.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't seen these videos, I can't remember his name either, but like you'll know him when you see him. Like he's talking to the OpenAI voice bot and just trying to get it to say not even crazy things, just showing you how in day-to-day conversation with it, it can still be quite sycophantic and lead you down the wrong path, or just give you absolutely incorrect information.
Yeah.
Uh, and Sam Altman has had to respond to those videos. Like you can imagine how that's affecting the PR look of AI models in general, not just OpenAI.
They're super funny. I Voice Mode 2 just came out, right? But it wasn't. I don't believe they actually updated. And by the way, somebody said the guest volume is too low. Is that better now? I turned it up a little bit. Let me know if you guys want me to turn it up further. But yeah, I don't think they actually updated the voice mode in the ChatGPT app. So yeah, like this guy.
Yeah. Well, because the models are good and they're able to correct themselves when you throw enough tokens to let them think. But
Sorry,
for voice
my
mode, people
Bluetooth
want the immediate
switched.
feedback.
There we go. All right, I just missed everything you said because, of course, I took my phone out and it switched to that.
Well,
Real
no,
professional.
I was saying because the models are good, particularly in a professional context, when you can throw some tokens at it and let it think for like 10, 20 seconds before it responds to you.
Yeah.
But you don't get that with the voice models when you're talking to something directly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Because
honestly
the
might be
latency has to be effectively zero. And
yeah.
not only that, it has to be an omni model, right? It has to process voice. It has to process. It has to be intelligence and voice at the same time, which is a different kind of family of model.
Mm-hmm. Which is probably going to be one of the big headwinds to getting AI to work in a customer service context.
That's right. Are you a believer that it needs to be an omni model or I know a lot of people are doing like text to speech, speech to text, and then kind of a text like a large language model in the middle. What do you think is the more high value implementation?
I don't think, well, it depends on, I don't think any of those models are inherently wrong. I mean, it depends on the actual use case. I mean, if you take customer service, for example, I really, I was, I was a believer in the idea that if you were, that customer service would be one of the job functions that would be very quickly augmented, if not automated, by AI's implementation. But no matter how you implement it, where the LLM is in the process, uh, there's going to be a limiting factor as far as getting the LLM to think through its responses and still provide an answer fast enough to get to the user in voice mode. So it doesn't really matter, the steps in the process if there is this one limiting factor that is just the fact of the LLM.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, first of all, Ara is from Ramp, little company that's been growing pretty quickly lately. And you guys have been putting out crazy projects, like hardcore technical artificial intelligence projects like I haven't seen from another company, not even another startup. What is going on? Is that like kind of top down, CEO just has a vision?
I mean, I'll answer the question by talking a little bit about even the uniqueness of my weird function at Ramp. So, uh, Ramp is this AI finance company. So, the product itself is corporate card, bill pay, treasury, accounting agents, um, tools for a finance team to close their books faster. That's the product. But I'm an economist at Ramp. My job is to produce economic research using the unique data set that we have. And you can imagine that is still a little surprising. Why would a company like Ramp, it's only like 7 years old at this point, have an economics team? It's because we cover 50,000 businesses, $100 billion of spend annually. And so we sit on this data set of where businesses are spending, where they're pulling back, the kinds of investments they're making, particularly the kind of investments they're making lately in AI. We have a lot of pretty tech forward companies on our platform too. So a lot of the AI spend that's happening goes through our platform. Uh, and then within that, we don't just see the company that they're spending on. We don't just see, oh, it's OpenAI versus Anthropic, but we also see the receipts and the invoices because they have to upload that to the platform to be tax compliant. So we get to see the model specifically they're using and whether or not they're using a subscription through Claude Code or if they're using the APIs, if they're using Opus versus Sonnet versus Gemini Flash. Uh, so that's really what powers our research. The value of it being that, hey, if you want to understand how to buy AI, because it's such a rapidly changing industry, whether you're someone super technical or you're someone who's just on an accounting team, ideally you'd be informed by some kind of data set about where the market's going, what other people are using. But all these companies are private. There's no public data set that tracks how businesses operate and spend in the United States. There's even less visibility into how the AI industry is developing, at least available to the public. And so we make that work public through our research that tracks AI spend overall, and then it tracks it at the model level too. And then we do deeper cuts where we track how that spend is changing, whether or not it's going toward more intensive use cases, the APIs, the agents, uh, how much spend is tracking within the early adopters versus the relatively new adopters of AI. And then we give out predictions, we share predictions about where we see the market going as well.
All
It
right.
comes from, however, Ramp being quite AI forward itself. So there's a ton of investment happening at Ramp. And so a lot of my research is informed by seeing the kind of AI experiments that are happening here at the company and then seeing, well, can I see how other companies are experimenting with it in our data set?
Does Ramp primarily or exclusively serve private companies?
We have nonprofits on our platform and we have a public sector motion too.
Okay.
So like the city of Ketchum, Iowa, for example, all the
Sure.
way to larger government entities that use Ramp. But so far, from my economic research, I've only reported data across the private sector. Uh, but one of the exciting, uh, you know, frontiers of our research, I think, will be seeing how do governments and nonprofits start to adopt this work, and how does it affect their productivity going forward.
Augmento said he's a vibe economist. Is that a label you also apply to yourself? I'm actually
I,
curious. Like, how much are you using AI tools for your job as an economist at Ramp?
oh, I mean, I think economics profession, I think, has changed a lot because of AI. First of all, because much of the economics work, even relative to most social sciences, has always been, at least for the last 20, 30 years, has been much more quantitative and much more technical. So it's required a lot more coding. So all of the same developments that have happened in coding for software engineers and then data scientists have also changed the role of an economist, where the methodologies that we're applying have, there's tons of GitHub repos about them too that the models are trained on. They know how to apply diff and diff and the methods that we use. Uh, I mean, you're still doing your own fine tuning the same way that an ML engineer is going to train a model. Uh, and you still need to make sure that the AI models are making the right assumptions when they're writing this kind of code. There's actually a lot of interesting research about how vibe economics work can lead to extremely different outcomes for very similar prompts because you're not exactly sure the kind of parameters that it's tuning. But it's gotten so much faster to iterate and experiment and check little ideas here and there before you dive into a deeper research process, to get data from other sources and scrape something from online or figure out how to use this messy government API. You can now just point an LLM at it and it'll get the data for you. So my research output has increased tremendously because I'm using AI models.
Awesome. Okay, if you're watching this now, please like, subscribe, share it. Really appreciate it. Ara has some really interesting things to say about Anthropic's revenue, OpenAI's revenue. There was a recent Wall Street Journal, and so that's what Wall Street Journal article, excuse me, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I really want to get the word out. It really helps the channel, so appreciate it. Thank you in advance. I wanted to say one other thing. Mark Santos, you started talking about AI on your YouTube channel. Very, very cool. Glad to hear that. Welcome to the club. Okay. All right. What do you think? Should we share the article and just go through it a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, this is our main result that we just put out this week. Uh, so I can intro a little bit. Our flagship research is called Ramp AI Index. So this is just basically tracking the share of companies in the United States that are paying for AI in some way. Again, it comes from Ramp spend data. The reason why this is so unique too is that there is no other way. We all generally understand, at least in the economics profession, that if AI is going to be transformative as far as the economy and productivity, uh, it's probably not going to show up in GDP or labor productivity statistics very soon. That's been the case with most technological revolutions. There tends to be some kind of learning curve in terms of how employees and companies figure out how to use it, and just generally some lagginess as far as how it gets implemented into people's
Right.
day-to-day work. Uh, and yet there's a lot of investment happening in AI. And so, you can understand why policymakers or businesses would want to track some metric that's a leading indicator of whether or not we're going to see those productivity gains. So the main metric has so far been, hey, are companies using it? Are companies using it? And then ideally, are they doubling down on that usage? Are they renewing their contracts? Are they spending more on tokens over time? Are they experimenting with multiple models? The kinds of metrics, a family of metrics that suggest that, hey, maybe it's not driving GDP gains right now, but companies are using it. They're figuring it out. Employees are finding some value in it such that companies are willing to make this investment year over year.
Yeah. All right. You bring up some really interesting points. Let me pause for a second. By the way, if anybody watching has questions along the way or thoughts, please drop them. Like, that's what we're here for. We'll try to answer them. And when I say we, I really mean Ara. Sorry. I think it's really interesting. So obviously, there's been this huge investment in AI infrastructure build out. Like
Yeah.
some of the most immense investment we've ever seen in human history happening right now, and really not slowing down. And a lot of, I'd say, AI pessimism comes from the fact that we haven't necessarily seen the GDP increase, and maybe even that's like a trailing indicator, but we haven't seen the productivity increase that we would have expected. But I think people are maybe getting the timelines wrong. We obviously, like, the revenue now, which we're going to be talking about today, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, has been absolutely exploding, right? I mean, like, multiple times from already big numbers from just the beginning of this year. So people are using AI. The primary use case is coding. But I still am wondering, are the companies that are paying for all of those tokens seeing the productivity increase that they're expecting? Eventually, we're going to have a reckoning where if the CFO is looking at the output and not seeing orders of magnitude increase in productivity, there are going to be difficult decisions to be made. Ara, what do you think of all of this?
I think it's, I mean, you have a very valid point, right? On our platform, we've seen the AI spend per token of companies that were spending on API and AI already has increased 13, 14x just in the last year. So AI spend itself for companies, even the companies that are pretty far along in the adoption curve, is still less than 1% of total spend, excluding payroll. So it's still a fairly small line item. It still pales in comparison to SaaS spend. But if you're on a 14x year over year trajectory, you can see how that could spiral out of control and very quickly become something that companies will tamp down.
Yeah.
Right. So if all the AI companies are right now growing under the expectation that, all these firms are going to spend continuously 14x growth rates, I don't think most businesses can sustainably do that. You saw Uber also said about a month ago that they blew through their annual AI budget just in one quarter. So that's going to happen more and more. And increasingly, we've seen indications that companies are responding to that by either opting for cheaper models. You don't always need the most performant model for every task. Specifically, we've seen them onboarding the kinds of uh, AI companies that aren't OpenAI and Anthropic, right? Like they're increasingly routing uh, processes through platforms like OpenRouter or Cursor, right, that allow you to select or automatically actually route you to a cheaper model and oftentimes a more appropriate model for the task to be done.
Yeah.
So you can also go through like a cheaper model through Anthropic. You can use Sana and Haiku instead of using Opus. But those tools don't happen automatically when you're using Claude Code directly. You need to make that selection yourself.
Yeah. Chantera asked, how do we know that the primary use case is coding? I'm going to just give my, I guess, opinion. That's all anybody's talking about. And when I talk to my friends who are using tons of tokens, I'm talking about potentially billions of tokens per day, the only use case that they are using it for right now is coding. But Ara, you probably have better visibility than anybody into how people are using these tokens. So what
Yeah.
are you seeing? Is this just an assumption that the primary use case is coding, or is there some data to back that up?
Most of the business spend, to be clear, so we're excluding. I see a business spend data set, so I only see what businesses are using. I don't see consumer ChatGPT spend. Uh, but of the business spend that's happening, the two main components. The first one is APIs. So like 80% of business spend is just APIs. Now that could be coding, but most of that is tech companies that are using the AI models to power some kind of back-end product experience. Like they are also powering some kind of AI tool on their software, like some labeling thing, or their own AI experience. And that's just going through directly to OpenAI and Anthropic through this middleman. So about 80% of it is that. Some of that is going to be coding as well. Most of it is just the API experience. And then the rest of the 20% is subscriptions. Within those subscriptions, most of them, at least most of the spend that's happening on the subscriptions is happening for amongst the sort of higher powered subscriptions that include like the agentic coding, like the higher levels of Claude Code that give you a little bit more tokens available, such that you could do like coding tasks. So a relatively large number of businesses have onboarded the enterprise subscriptions that give everyone access to ChatGPT as a chatbot or Claude as a chatbot. But most of the spend that's happening is happening for either AI-powered experiences, AI native apps, or coding specifically. Most of the tokens that are being consumed are also for those purposes. And then I think what you're getting at too is most of the discourse that we see about the actual value being provided by AI
Yeah.
is happening in coding. The industries that were earliest to adopt AI and still have the highest AI adoption rates, about 75, 80% today, are software and tech, finance, and professional services. So these are fundamentally the industries that have an outsized number of employees doing software engineering, coding, research, the tasks that would benefit from a coding or agent subscription.
All right. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think the workhorse family of models. So that's like the Gemini Flash, some of the faster, slightly less capable OpenAI models, the Sonnet models, these models that are a fraction of the price of the absolute frontier. Those are incredibly important. And if they aren't currently powering a lot of US enterprise today, they're going to be very soon in the future. Do you have visibility at that level of detail into specifically which models a lot of that spend is going to, or not? And if
Yeah.
not, like, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, still, most of the spend is going through the frontier models. Pretty quickly, too, when a new frontier model is released, within a month or two, more than half of spend has already shifted over to that model.
Is that because every time they release a model, the cost per token is just so much higher that like the
Yeah,
spend follows, and maybe the usage
exactly.
isn't following as strongly?
Well, the most expensive models power most of the revenue of these firms. I mean, a lot of firms use Haiku and use Gemini Flash, but they are so cheap that they contribute less than 10-20% of the, easily less than 20% of the actual business spend that's going to OpenAI and Anthropic and Gemini. Uh, so the high dollar spend is concentrated amongst the most performant models. I do think, however, that's what's probably going to change. Because I think right now, the firms that are spending the most on AI are the ones with pretty large AI budgets. So the mix of firms that are buying AI is going to change, one, right? So we're going to start pulling more firms into the industry that don't necessarily have the budget or need to pay for the most performant AI models all the time. So that's going to increase usage and the share of models like Haiku and Sonnet. And then second, even of the companies that are very intense AI adopters will start to run up against their budgets for AI. And they'll start shifting some amount of tasks over to the cheaper models if they can, especially as, the most expensive models are also the ones that are, they take much longer to run.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are most subject to compute constraints. So they suffer from their own product issue, such that even if it were the same price, you're oftentimes better off just switching to Sonnet or Haiku for, again, many tasks that only need that amount of performance.
That's
But
right.
right now, it's really hard as an engineer or a data scientist or an economist to understand, hey, what task can I route to what model?
Yeah, and
That is
the
not a
labs
built.
are the labs are not incentivized to give you the
Yep.
best, cheapest, fastest token. They are incentivized to give you the most expensive token, right?
Yep.
Or really like just not think about the problem. It's not top of mind for them. I am a big fan of model routing. There's still a lot to be desired there, but like the efficiency gains, the cost savings, even the performance, the kind of overall quality can be improved by simply routing the prompt to the right model.
Yep.
I want to see more of that. And like, is that just kind of we're not there yet? Are the companies not sophisticated enough to do it themselves? Do you think it's going to need to be something that the labs introduce themselves and kind of onboard companies to be doing themselves?
Yeah, I think they don't right now have enough competitive pressure being applied against them. So over time, you're going to see more spend shift over to the firms that are able to do that kind of routing intelligently. Uh, and then for the model companies themselves, right now we just saw that Anthropic has now taken more businesses use Anthropic than OpenAI for the first time. That was
Yeah,
the
we're going
result
to
of our
take a look
language.
at this in a moment.
And so you can imagine that news, the rise of Anthropic, plus a renewed focus from OpenAI, will drive OpenAI and Anthropic to be more competitive with each other, such that they are able to address the concerns of CFOs and companies that are seeing these exploding token budgets. Ideally, the forces of the market will play out, and you'll see the price of AI start to come down, largely as a function of the companies offering more efficient tooling, not in producing models that suffer from performance issues.
Yeah, and just to introduce Ara again, so for people who came in midway through the stream, this is Ara Karazian, chief economist at Ramp. Just has super awesome insights into how mostly private, but also public companies are spending specifically around AI. And the reason I wanted to bring him on today was because of this article right here. So this is an article in the Wall Street Journal really just highlighting how fast Anthropic's revenue and enterprise penetration has been growing. Anthropic was behind. Now it's the AI boom's front runner. Anthropic's revenue has passed OpenAI's revenue. And specifically why this article is because Ramp had a nice graph that they provided to the Wall Street Journal. But let me read a little bit, and then Ara, I want to tag in to give some of your insights. Anthropic is emerging as the presumptive frontrunner in the race for artificial intelligence supremacy, with faster growth and fundraising that could soon yield a higher valuation than rival OpenAI. And we're already seeing that higher valuation in the private markets, at least, whatever you can believe from the private market valuations. They are currently raising at 900 billion. I did read that. But let me scroll down here. This is what's interesting. So this is share of Ramp customers with paid subscriptions to AI services. Now, there's a few interesting bits here. I'm going to just kind of tee this off, and then, Ara, I'm going to pass it to you. First of all, Google, XAI, and DeepSeek, all at the bottom. I want to talk about open source, and I want to talk about what Google needs to do. But what we see here is OpenAI obviously early and had this explosive growth in the middle of 2025, but seemingly flattens out through now. But Anthropic, right around that same time, has just absolutely exploded. And then I also lastly want to talk about the overall penetration of AI within enterprise. So Ara, walk us through what we're seeing here.
So we've been tracking these results for over about a year now. Again, this is a pretty simple metric to start. It's just the share of firms in the United States that are using these models at all based on ramp data. So we're really just tracking adoption. We're not even tracking the intensity of that adoption, at least with this specific chart.
And actually, can I interrupt for 1 second? So, but this is share of Ramp customers, and I think you mentioned last time when you were on the show, Ramp customers tend to be more tech forward, correct?
Yeah, we have a pretty good we have a standard distribution of industries. We have coverage of tech, but also manufacturing and finance and medical offices. We also break out these sectors on our website where you can download the data and export for yourself. But what we found in our research is that Ramp customers tend to be a little bit more tech forward anyway, so they're probably more likely to adopt AI relative to the average firm in the US. But even within Ramp data, we see that you can cut that again by the firms in Ramp data that are relative early adopters. You have firms on Ramp that are in tech, and you have firms on Ramp that are, restaurants and food companies. The firms in tech tended to be leading indicators of where the food companies would go. They have higher adoption rates. They're more likely to use multiple models. Food and restaurant companies, not an obvious candidate for AI adoption, but they do tend to follow those trends, just tend to follow it on a longer lag. And so in our data set, the main results were, one, in 2023, 2024, AI was still a relatively small line item for most firms. It was relatively experimental. Maybe 10 to 20% of firms on our platform were paying for it in some way. And the main player was OpenAI. Anthropic was a single-digit level of adoption around that time. It was in 2025 that we started to see this massive run-up in adoption. And you start to see enterprise AI really start to have some productivity gains, at least for certain sectors. This is when coding agents became particularly useful. The models got really good, and OpenAI specifically was powering a lot of that growth. In large part, I think, because it was this consumer default. And so as companies were devising their AI purchasing strategies, who do you buy from? You buy from the one that you understand as a consumer. Mm-hmm. So that was a story of 2025. It was at the end of 2025 that we see this inflection point into January, where for the first time in January, we looked at customers that were buying AI for the first time. So this is totally new adopter businesses. Now, previously, they'd been buying OpenAI at about a rate of 60-40. And then in January, it flipped in the matter of 2-3 weeks, where by the end of January, we saw that actually Anthropic was the go-to choice for companies buying AI for the first time.
Do you remember what model was the frontier at that moment? Was it Opus 4.6 or 4.5?
I think it was 4.6, 4.5, 4.6. It was around that era. But it wasn't because of the model. This was also around the same time that Claude Cowork was coming out.
Cowork or
This is
Claude Code?
Claude Code had been out for several months, but Claude Cowork, and particularly Claude's um, foray into non-technical users and use cases,
Right.
started to happen at the end of 2025, and then start to actually show up in our data set around then, and then really start to take off around January of 2026. And so Claude's growth wasn't, I mean, it was sort of foundationally, the important part of that growth was that the model companies were improving, but how did it really overtake OpenAI? That OpenAI was for a long time focusing on consumers, started to focus on enterprise, but hadn't really refined its enterprise use cases yet. Meanwhile, Anthropic had always been focused on these highly technical users, really nailed the coding agent product. And then once it had those evangelists and early adopters solidly in its fold, started to expand into these non-technical use cases and formats. Claude Cowork comes out. That drives a lot of subscription growth, and a lot of growth with the non-technical users. And then the Department of Defense labels Anthropic a security threat, and it certainly didn't slow down Anthropic's growth. I can't say we don't see like why do people subscribe to Anthropic, but it definitely didn't slow it down. If anything, Anthropic accelerated in this spring.
Is it just a coincidence, or do you think there was like no press is bad press type thing? Like everybody just started hearing about Anthropic more. Obviously, the president was talking about it. The Department of War was talking about it. It was just all over the news at the same time.
I think it could have been bad press because remember, we're not looking at a consumer data set. We're looking at a business spend data set. So you could imagine that most businesses, particularly large businesses, or businesses that do some work with firms that work with the government, part of the security threat distinction was that, hey, any firm, all these firms, if you have some connection to government work or government contracting, you need to offboard Anthropic. So those businesses, particularly given that there is a strong competitive product from OpenAI available, there's a timeline in which they would have switched away from Anthropic. So the fact that they didn't, I think, is indicative of the fact that the Department of Defense designation was not taken very seriously. And we'll note that the reporting within weeks of the initial threat, of the initial decision, showed that the Department of Defense was very willing to offer, delays to the actual designation of the threat, to give exemptions out to companies that didn't want to offboard Anthropic. So, and then now, I mean, the idea that, and now the Department of Defense is very actively, still an Anthropic customer. It doesn't seem like that's going to go away anytime soon. So the business community did not really flinch at the designation.
Yeah.
At least shown by our data.
All right. By the way, I want to be mindful of your time. How you doing?
We're good. We should. Okay. Are there actually? I'm curious about the questions because I haven't looked at the chat in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So let me queue up chat. Chat. If you have questions for Ara, chief economist at Ramp, about all things, how OpenAI's growth has been, how it compares to Anthropic, drop it in chat right now. So while that's happening, let's talk about Google and open source. Let's talk about Google first. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't Google seen the type of adoption that OpenAI and Anthropic have? They have incredible models. They might not be Opus 4647 level or GPT 5.5 level, but they are very good, very inexpensive relative. What is going on? Why hasn't Google seen that type of growth?
I actually think Google's model adoption is relatively high and underrated, but it's specifically high amongst non-technical users. Let's remember that Google has a significant distributional advantage in that it offers Gemini for free through Workspace. And so and that's, by the way, something that we can't track in our data set because we only track paid adoption. So if you're using Gemini for free through Workspace, we significantly underrate that Gemini Google adoption in our data set for that reason.
So so you're saying it's like a bundling thing? If they
Yeah.
bundle it with other products, it's difficult to tell how much spend is actually being attributed to the AI portion of that bundle.
Well, what I mean is that if you're tracking paid adoption, the actual number of firms that are using Google's models is probably significantly higher than what you'd otherwise observe because they're using it for free through Workspace. Now, again, a lot of that use is going to be concentrated amongst non-technical users just because that is how the distribution works. Um, but, I can think about the developer experience from my own perspective as a user of these models. Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex have both launched tools that integrate very well throughout the tools that I need to use and the uh, context available through my company. Google hasn't really launched that kind of tool. You could connect your own, you could figure out some system where you get some local version of your terminal running Gemini and connecting to it's a little more technically complex to get set up. They haven't launched like a true Claude Code Codex like desktop app competitor that has historically been, at least in our data set, what has driven these massive run-ups in adoption. And so I think that's why it feels like developers aren't really using Gemini actively. But there's certainly a lot of spend going through Gemini just by nature of the AI product native experiences that's happening. Like relatively few businesses are using Gemini, but of the ones that are big spenders on AI, they are using Gemini's Flash models for a ton of AI native experiences and to power their own products and to do data labeling. So, I don't think that Gemini is a small player. I just think it's relatively small if you're only looking at software engineering tasks.
Yeah. All right. We have our first question from Mark Santos. I have a follow-up question to this, but Ara, why do you think businesses are switching to Claude? I see a ton of people on X switching from Claude to GPT 5.5. Do you think it's swinging back, or is the trend still switching to Claude? And there's probably a more nuanced question around, is X kind of like the initial vibe? Is that just like it's a complete vacuum and living on its own? But first, let's answer Mark's question. Why are people switching to Claude?
Well, I think the switching to Claude, you're getting at a really interesting point when you're talking about, hey, is X just like a small segment of the population? Is it really representative of where things are going? When we measure these averages, essentially, of, hey, who's on, how many firms use OpenAI versus Anthropic, there are distinct groups within those averages. There are the early adopters, and then there are the new adopters, the high intensity users versus the low intensity users, the technical users versus the non-technical users. And they're all kind of moving in different directions. So at least right now, they're all kind of moving in different directions. So our estimate will track the aggregate, but our research behind the scenes is tracking how these different groups are moving. So you look at the non-technical, relatively low-intensity users, a lot of them are starting up Claude or switching to Claude. So they're buying it for the first time, they're using Claude, or they're relatively low-intensity users, they're using Claude they're switching to Claude. For the highly technical, high-intensity users, a lot of them were using Claude alongside OpenAI, if not primarily using Claude already for a while now. And they are also increasingly starting to use multiple models, and that includes OpenAI, but that also includes, models available through the platforms like OpenRouter, free and open source models that they can route through. So if you want to look at those early adopters, if you want to look at those sort of highly technical users as a leading indicator, which is not unreasonable to do, you can imagine that the non-technical users will also start to go down the same path, where they're not necessarily going to be locked into one model. A growing share of firms on our platform are using two or more. Growing amount of non-technical, non-tech adjacent firms as well are starting to use and onboard large contracts with not just the model companies, but with vertical specific tools that we don't even talk about that much, like an
Like
AI
Harvey.
vendor that Harvey's a great example, like the legal AI tool, or like an 11 Labs, like voice agents, products that are built on top of the models, but they provide something very specific, and the first AI purchase that a company makes is typically going to be OpenAI or Anthropic. But once they become more familiar with the market and what's available, they start experimenting with these other vendors. And the real sign of whether or not this company is maturing along the AI adoption curve is whether or not it renews those vendors,
Yeah.
particularly the non-model company vendors. Are we getting better matching between customers and vendors? Uh, are vendors able to provide a product that is actually useful and relevant to the market? Because there's a lot of dynamism in this sector. I don't think people are used to the fact that we're seeing several percentage point changes in adoption rates for software companies and B2B SaaS. Like that's pretty unusual month over month, such that a newcomer can displace a large incumbent in the matter of a year. You know, we saw that with GitHub Copilot and Cursor. We just saw that with Anthropic and OpenAI.
The switching
You know, you
costs
can,
are effectively zero, right? I mean, you can.
Mhm.
I think the only switching cost when you're talking about enterprise AI is the contract itself. From a technology perspective, swapping out, GPT-5.5 for Opus 4.7, you really just have to update your prompt, and you really like don't have to do that, but you get a little bit of optimization out of that, but like the switching cost is effectively zero. So are these
Mhm.
are these just commodities at this point? Are they getting commoditized?
Well, they're clearly not commodities because you can think of something like Anthropic, which has a lot of stickiness. This is a product that is more expensive than OpenAI's models. I mean, if you're using the subscription for Cloud Code, you get less usage
Yeah.
for the same price, actually for a
Yeah.
higher price than what's available through OpenAI's Codex.
Yeah.
You get a degraded product that crashes all the time and is always disrupted, that you constantly run out of tokens, and yet more developers are using Claude than OpenAI. So there's clearly some friction still, and
Yeah.
some amount of uh, user stickiness, and yet that's also starting to change. Like I can say anecdotally, I know many developers at Ramp that are using Codex more than they did last month, specifically because it's a really good model, and they've noticed degraded quality from Claude.
Yeah.
And then the companies recognize it too. I mean, Anthropic put out a whole release note saying that, hey, we are aware of these degraded issues. We've solved it with a combination of product updates. They got the whole SpaceX deal to give them more compute. And so we're going to make all usage free, like, not usage free, but they reset everyone's limits for the month. Those are not decisions made lightly by the company. They are also subject to competitive pressures. So they're not commodities, but there is, because there is a lot of stickiness, it seems. And then there's also an increasing amount of competitive pressure. And I think that's going to be that's ultimately great for businesses and the users of these models.
All right, Mark, thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. Anybody else who wants to keep dropping questions, I see a bunch in here. Let me go through them in a second. And also, if you're watching, please like this stream so we can get more people watching it. Appreciate it. Thank you. Here's one from Irish Pixel. Um, as someone helping small companies adopt agents and integrations with local LLM, so open source, do you think this is about to expire with the best iteration of intelligence? What I think he might be asking is very similar to what we're seeing here on the chart, where DeepSeek basically has very little adoption. Is open source doomed in enterprise, or like I actually think it's quite the opposite. But I want to get your thoughts. Is it just these frontier closed source models are moving too quickly, they're getting better too quickly, that open source cannot keep up?
I don't
Thanks,
think it's
Irish.
gonna. I think it's. I don't think that there's a long-term future in which companies are hosting models locally, because I just don't think that that the local hosting will keep up with the kind of development that's happening all the time. I do think there's a future for companies that use platforms that host these models for them and
Right.
are doing the model updates themselves there. I mean, is it always going to be a little bit laggy relative to what is available from the frontier models? Of course, by a lot,
You
Uh,
you think forever?
yeah, of course. I mean, well, the open source models will always be laggy to the frontier models, in large part because the open source models are trained using the outputs of the frontier models. So, if you just
Some
disappear all the
yeah.
frontier,
They don't
You're
they,
not.
to be like they don't need to be. They are, but they don't need
They
to be.
are.
So like when you're looking at obviously there was that report out of Anthropic that there was the Chinese AI labs were distillation hacking,
Uh-huh.
right? And so yeah, DeepSeek, Kimi, there was a one or two others. They definitely were, but those are still really good models. Like I don't know the extent of how much of that distillation hacking went into how good the model is. But then you look at the Gemma family of models, which is by Google. Those are distilled models, right? But it doesn't have to be. These companies can release frontier open source models. It just there's no business model around it, right? And actually, you're probably the perfect person to ask about this. I put out an essay about this. There is no business model for open source in the United States. Do you agree, or what am I missing?
Um, I mean, look, there's still there's still a business model around the infrastructure of making these open source models available. If
But
you
for the
use a
model
platform like
creators,
for the creators,
I'll just give a little bit more detail on what I mean. Um, let's say you're a startup and you want to develop a frontier open source model. You have to raise a ton of money. And so what's the monetization route for those open source models? You have to serve inference. So not only do you have to spend so much money on R&D and researchers to build this incredible model, let's say you actually do it, then you have to go serve it. But if you open source it, your competitors that are literally only doing inference have significantly higher margins than you and can, I guess,
Mhm.
outcompete you on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it can be a competitive headwind, right? It makes it a lot harder for you to operate as a business. But even in traditional SaaS, there are companies that open source their primary product, and then they also sell the productized version of it. Like DBT is an example. So in my head, I think that it would be similar for AI, if not maybe I mean, AI is obviously sort of higher cost.
I think
So I guess
that's the difference.
that's the difference.
The
But
the
then,
the initial investment is orders
yeah,
of magnitude higher than any other successful open source business model that we've
Mhm.
seen.
Yeah. But I mean, again, what might be the mitigating factor in this is that you don't need a frontier highly performant model for every single task.
Yeah.
And so um, that's where the opportunity is. Well, that could be the sort of opportunity for these kinds of open source models, at least.
Cool.
There's definitely demand
Um,
for it.
we have a question from Wagner Montez. Ara and Matt, do you guys think that we are getting to the cost benefit plateau for coding when price will matter more than relative quality like a commodity? Very much in line with what we've been talking about.
Uh, Cost benefit plateau, as in, hey, there's no point in paying more for models. Uh, is that the idea, you think?
I think the idea is like the we are increasing spend on coding tokens. The
Yeah.
per price on a coding token is increasing. Are we seeing the economic output, the productivity output from those tokens?
I do think that there is a productivity gain from AI as it is used. I also think that we've been in this period where companies are increasing their spend so dramatically. There's still more to go. Because again, this is still a very small line item for most company budgets. It's just that most company budgets are not that high for AI as is, so they keep blowing through it. And that the trajectory they're on is just so high that no one's really sure how much to budget for AI. So I don't think we've hit a cost benefit plateau. I think most firms still are not using these models to the right, to the greatest extent. Right, they'll continuously see more gains. People still need to figure out how to use these models most effectively. The model companies need to get better at more efficient routing and offer those products. Um, but I think the pressure is going to come from multiple directions. I mean, the labs themselves are going to be competitive such that they offer more cost efficient products, and they will pressure each other to do that. And then actual businesses and buyers of AI will pressure the model companies as well to bring the cost down outright and to offer those kinds of um, more price efficient models, because they're going to be hitting up they're going to be hitting their own budget limits.
Okay. I think those are all the questions for now. Any last points you want to make on this graph or what we've been seeing? I think maybe I'd like to hear from you about this, like, jockeying for top position. Is it just whoever has the best model, that's where the dollars are going to flow? Is there any more significant lock-in that we're going to be able, or that the AI labs are going to be able to capture?
I think that, look, it doesn't need to be about jockeying for first place, because the firms that are the biggest AI spenders typically spread that spend across multiple AI providers. They're continuously experimenting and using the models as they get updated and figuring out what's good for what task and what use case and what teams like this distribution method versus that. Some people like Cowork, some people like OpenAI's experience. All right, so it's not just about what's the most performant model. These are products at the end of the day as well. There's also going to be a lot of growth from, like, I am not a death of SaaS person. Like, I actually think that there are SaaS companies that will be able to use the models to produce their own AI native experiences and be able to compete very effectively with the labs. I don't think Claude Design is going to kill off Figma. Last month, Figma was still one of the fastest growing companies on Ramp's platform, even though
Yeah, they
Claude
just put
Design
out their earnings, and they pretty much a big middle finger to everybody who was doubting them.
Yeah. So again, Claude's product is going to be a competitor to Figma, but I don't think it's going to eliminate it
Have you used
entirely.
Claude Design, by the way, Ara?
No, but I should. I've done some front end stuff with Claude, but like with Claude Code, but I haven't used Claude Design yet. But people here are using it. I've seen.
It's
Yeah.
super impressive, and the designs are really good. But you chew up your token allocation in like seconds.
Yeah. So that's there. Hopefully some competitive pressure will be applied. Um, but all this work that we do is continuing research. I write about it for the readers here, for the watchers here. I write about it at econlab.substack.com. I write online and I take feedback there as well. So if there's anything you guys want to see in Ramp data, please give a shout, because this is a very dynamic market, and even the way that we measure AI will be changing. Adoption is going to hit 100. It's going to hit 90% within 1, 2, 3 years, very
Wow.
conservatively. And so, what do we measure after that? The intensity of adoption, how firms are using it most effectively, how costs are changing, the teams that are using it, and the tasks they're allocating it to, and then ideally we'll start to see some movement in productivity statistics.
Ara, thank you so much for joining. Where can people find you?
Right on Twitter and LinkedIn nowadays, even Instagram. You can find me. Again, it's all Econ Lab brand or my name, Ara Karazian.
Econ Lab, and I'll drop Ara Karazian as well. Go find him. Go follow him on X. He's a great follow. He produces fantastic reports just like this one. Ara, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, guys.
See ya. All right. That was very cool. Trying something new, bringing on a friend of the show, Ara. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Cool. I think we're going to end this stream here. Love. Here you go. Love from Iran. There you go. Let me know what you think about this format. Just bringing in somebody for a casual conversation, folks who are kind of deep in the industry, very knowledgeable, really good insights. Go, like the channel, subscribe to the channel. As always, we're putting a lot of effort. I know I said this last time. I just want to say one more time. We're putting a lot of effort into our newsletter. We're having guest posters, original content there. So go check it out, forwardfuture.ai/newsletter. I'm going to put it in there right now. forwardfuture.ai/newsletter. Mark, you're saying no, don't end. I'm solo right now. I have no one backing me up, so I think that's going to be it for today. But we will do more live streams next week. I promise you. I'm actually trying to set something kind of cool up next week. I can't tell you what it is yet, but maybe later next week. We'll be there. Oh, one more thing. I'm interviewing Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, on Tuesday at Google I/O. So it's going to be live streamed. Go watch that. It's going to be really cool. I have some fun questions for him. And thanks for joining today. Thank you all for joining, commenting, giving us your questions. Really appreciate it. It's fun seeing all you guys come back. So yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.